You spend enough time on the road, you learn to listen. Not just to the rumble of your engine or the crackle of the CB, but to the road itself. Every stretch of asphalt has its own song, its own story. The I-80 through Wyoming hums a lonely tune of wind and snow. The I-10 in Texas sweats out a story of heat and endless horizons. But there's a stretch of the old Route 66 out where Arizona starts to bleed into New Mexico that doesn't sing. It whispers. And you don't want to hear what it has to say. I'm what you'd call an old-timer. Got more miles on my Odama than most folks have on their whole family tree. I've seen things that would make a city boy's hair turn white overnight. Breakdowns in the middle of the Mojave. Snowstorms in the Rockies that bury you alive. Truck stop brawls over the last piece of pie. But none of it, gets under your skin like the stories from that one particular stretch of the Mother Road. The first time I heard it, I was at a greasy spoon called the Dusty Plate just outside of Kingman. I was young, full of piss and vinegar. Thought I owned the road. An old fella, skin like cracked leather, and eyes that had seen too many sunrises, was nursing a black coffee. He saw the new plates on my rig, bright, shiny steel from Washington State. He just grunted. "Gonna be taking the old road, east?" he asked, his voice raspy like gravel. "Yes, sir," I said proudly. "See the sights, feel the history." He took a long, slow sip of his coffee. "History's got teeth out there, kid. Especially on that stretch past the Painted Desert. You keep an eye on your plates, front and back." I must have looked at him like he was crazy. "My plates? Why?" "There's a collector out there," he said, his eyes not looking at me, but through me at the dark highway outside the window. They call him the plate collector. Used to be a driver, name was Silas. Drove a classic Peterbilt, cherry red. He was obsessed, had to have a plate from every state in the Union, nailed to the wall of his garage. It was his life's work. The story goes, he had 47, just needed 3 more. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air, thick as diesel smoke. One night, on that very stretch, he was running hard. A storm blew in out of nowhere. He swerved to miss a coyote, jackknifed his rig, and went over the edge of a ravine. They didn't find the wreck for 3 days. "Tough break," I said, trying to sound cool. The old man finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. They found him. They found the truck, but they never found his box of plates. And ever since, rigs running that road, they lose theirs. Not stolen at a truck stop. They vanish right while you're rolling, doing 70 miles an hour. 1 minute it's there, the next, just empty screw holes. Silas is still out there, they say, still trying to finish his collection. I laughed it off, paid for my coffee, and climbed back into my Kenworth. A ghost story, a fun little piece of road lore to spook the new guys. I checked my mirrors, saw my Washington plate gleaming under the truck stoplights, and put the hammer down. I had a schedule to keep. I didn't know it then, but I was driving straight into the collector's territory. And he was still missing a plate from the Pacific Northwest. The desert at night is a different world. The heat of the day bleeds away and leaves behind a deep, profound cold. The sky is so black and full of stars it feels like you could fall right up into it. It's beautiful, but it's a lonely kind of beauty. It makes a man feel small. I was about 100 miles east of Flagstaff, deep in the heart of the collector's supposed hunting ground. The old man's story was a faint echo in my mind, drowned out by the roar of my Cummins engine and a classic rock station that was starting to fade into static. The road was empty. Just me, my 18-wheeler, and the endless ribbon of asphalt unspooling in my headlights. That's when the feeling started. It began as a prickle on the back of my neck, the kind of feeling you get when you know you're being watched. I scanned my mirrors. Nothing. The feeling grew stronger.
The air in my cab, which had been warm from the heater, suddenly turned ice cold. It was a specific, localized cold, as if someone had opened a freezer door right next to my seat. I could see my own breath fogging in the air. The radio finally gave up, dissolving into a wall of hissing static. I shut it off. The silence that rushed in was worse. It was heavy, expectant.
Then I heard it. Over the deep rumble of my engine, there was another sound, a faint, metallic scrape. It was high-pitched and irregular. Scree, tap, scrape. It sounded like it was coming from the front of the truck. My first thought was a thrown rock from the road, but the sound was too deliberate, too close. I slowed down, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The scraping stopped. I held my breath, listening. The only sound was my engine and the thumping of my own heart. I told myself I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. I pushed on for another hour, the cold spot in the cab slowly fading. By the time I saw the glow of a 24-hour truck stop on the horizon, I'd almost convinced myself it was all in my head. As I walked past the front of my rig, I stopped. I froze when my eyes fell on the front bumper. The license plate was gone. It wasn't bent or mangled. The two bolts were still there, screwed tight into the bumper. The plate itself had simply vanished. It was just gone, as clean as a whisper. The old man's words came rushing back. Right while you're rolling, it vanishes. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a story. On my return trip west, I started asking questions. At a diner in Gallup, I brought it up with a couple of other drivers. But the other driver, an older guy with a tired face, looked at me for a long moment. "You lose something?" he asked, his voice low. I just nodded. "Front plate." He grimaced. "Happens. They say it's the collector, Silas. That's just a story, right?" He took a long drink of water. "Every story starts somewhere. My dad drove this route back in the 70s. He knew Silas. Said he wasn't a bad guy, just passionate. That collection was all he had. Just got Delaware, or anyone seen a Rhode Island rolling through. It was his holy grail." "So what happened?" I pressed. "The night he crashed," the driver continued, "my dad heard Silas run the wire. He sounded excited, frantic. He was yelling, 'I see it! It's the Hawaii! The last one!' Apparently some tourist was driving through with a Hawaii plate. My dad thinks Silas was driving too fast, blinded by the rain in his obsession, trying to catch up to that tourist. He never made it to the rest stop." A chill went down my spine. So he hadn't needed 3. He'd gotten it down to 1. Hawaii. "So he takes other plates? Why my Washington plate?" I asked. The driver leaned in. "Here's the part that'll keep you up at night. The legend has a second part. They say his collection, which was in a wooden box on the passenger seat, was smashed in the wreck. The plates were scattered all down the ravine. So now, he's not just looking for the one he was missing. He's replacing the ones he lost. He's starting the collection all over again." I left that diner with a sick feeling in my stomach. This was an eternal, obsessive task. I knew I had to drive that road again on my way home, and this time, I was dreading it. Driving a road you're scared of is a special kind of hell. A week later, I was heading west, back in his territory. This time, I was prepared. Before I hit the stretch, I stopped and double-checked my plates. I'd gotten a new Washington plate mailed to me, and I'd fastened it on with locking bolts. I tightened them with a wrench until my knuckles were raw. The sun went down, and the desert turned that deep, bruised purple. The miles ticked by, agonizingly slow. I started to relax, just a little. That's when the fog rolled in. It came out of nowhere, on a crystal clear night. I was driving into a solid white wall. I slowed the rig to a crawl.
The temperature in the cab plummeted. That same unnatural freezer door cold. My CB radio crackled to life. It wasn't a voice, it was music. Faint, tinny, and old. A 70s country song. It played for about 10 seconds, then dissolved into static. And then I heard it again, the scraping. This time it wasn't from the front, it was from the back, from the trailer. It was a long, deliberate sound. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was in a blind fog, and something was outside my truck. Tap, tap, ting. The sound of a wrench hitting a bolt. I swear to God, I heard it. I stomped on the accelerator. The engine roared, and the rig lurched forward into the wet abyss. The scraping sound grew frantic, louder. Scrape! Scratch! Scree! A final high-pitched shriek of nettle on rattle echoed from the back of the trailer. And then the fog was gone.
I didn't stop. I drove for another hour, my whole body shaking, until I reached the lights of a major truck stop. I got out and walked to the back of my trailer, carrying a heavy Maglite flashlight like a club. My new Washington plate was still there. The locking bolts had held. But it was savaged. There were deep, angry gouges all over it, long scratches that tore through the paint and into the steel beneath. It looked like someone had tried to pry it off with a crowbar. Scratched and scarred, but still there. He had tried, and he had failed. I had never been so terrified or so relieved in my entire life. I don't drive that stretch of 66 anymore. I'll take the I-40, add 4 hours to my trip. I don't care. That night changed me. I became one of the old guys at the truck stops. The younger drivers, they'd laugh when the story of the plate collector came up. I don't laugh anymore. I just sip my coffee and keep my mouth shut.
I've thought about it a lot on those long, lonely nights on the road. Why me? Why a Washington plate? And then I pieced it together. Silas was from back east. The ones he was missing would have been the faraway ones. Alaska, Hawaii, and maybe the ones from the corners of the country, like Washington. Sometimes when I'm driving late and the road gets quiet, I think about him. I don't see a monster. I see a lonely man in a cherry red Peterbilt chasing the only thing he had left. I see him out there in the dark, in the cold, forever stuck on that one stretch of road, his phantom hands holding a phantom wrench. And I wonder, what happens when he gets them all? What happens when the last plate is finally collected? Does he finally find peace? Or does the story just change? Maybe then he starts collecting something else. Hubcaps, mud flaps, or maybe even drivers. So if you ever find yourself on that old, forgotten piece of the mother road when the sun is down and you're all alone, do me a favor. Pull over and do a walk around. Check your bolts, because he's still out there. I know he is. He's still working night after night, trying to fill the empty spaces on his wall. And his collection is getting closer and closer to being complete. You just better pray your state is one he's already got.